Now we'd like to welcome in Rex Hoggard, who is in Miami and spent the day at Doral covering LIV Golf's season finale. Before we get into the news of the day, Rex, let's just start with the report from the Wall Street Journal. What should we make of the fact that these other governing bodies are now a part of the investigation?
Well, when you look at the landscape of what's going on legally right now between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, these are essentially the same topics. We're talking about antitrust. We're talking about anti-competitive issues that the Tour is having to deal with on a legal front here. Now, these are two separate deals. The lawsuit that came up in U.S. District Court in Northern California, that's between the PGA Tour, three players who remain in the suit, and LIV Golf. And that's probably going to take a few years to hash out. But it deals with the same, not just concept, but also the same ecosystem. When we talk about what LIV's trying to get to, it's how the Tour dealt with everyone in that ecosystem, and Augusta National, and the RNA, and the USGA, and everyone else, and that orb is going to have to be part of this. So it's no surprise that the DOJ stepped in on this particular issue. I will say, however, that because the DOJ has some powers at their disposal that certainly you wouldn't have in the lawsuit that's going on in California, specifically the power to subpoena. This will probably move along quicker than that lawsuit.
Interesting to see how everything will continue to play out legally. Now to the LIV Golf itself, their tour championship being held at Doral with a $50 million purse at stake. I'm curious what your day was like. Did you get the opportunity to talk with players? What was the mood like in Miami?
It was an eventful day. I got to talk to quite a few players, and I found it interesting that it's kind of a twofold feeling around Doral right now. I mean, one is sort of a feeling of accomplishment. I mean, I think Phil Mickelson spoke specifically that today about the idea that 6 or 7 months ago it was hard to imagine that the Tour could get to where they are right now. He even pointed to the New Yorker story that came out last week, that there was a time back in February when Phil made those comments about the Saudi government as well as the PGA Tour, when this almost didn't happen. So I think when you look back, there is that sense of accomplishment. The other half of this is there's very much a sense of uncertainty among players. Chief among them will be the world ranking. We've talked a lot about the idea that these events don't get world ranking points in. I spoke to numerous players today who are either right there on the bubble of top 50 in the world or expect to fall out of that top 50 bubble, who understand now that it's become real. You will not get that invitation that you're used to getting from Augusta National. So it's kind of a twofold. It's bittersweet for many players this week.
Well, Rex, speaking of players' comments, 2 weeks ago at the LIV Jeddah event in Saudi Arabia, Phil Mickelson said in a press conference there that he was happy with his decision to join LIV Golf because the PGA Tour was trending downward and LIV Golf is the winning side. He spoke again today. Any change in his opinions?
I don't think it's a change in his opinion. I will say that this has been a year of self-reflection for Phil Mickelson on a lot of different fronts. I referenced those comments he made in February. He has since walked those comments back. And I think he did a little of that today when he was asked specifically about some things that Rory McIlroy said. And Rory and Jon Rahm both pushed back on the idea that LIV Golf is trending in the right direction and the PGA Tour is heading in the wrong direction. In this particular case, the quote from Phil was he shouldn't have said that. And I think this goes again to the idea that there is a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment of what they've been able to accomplish. And certainly he's been on the front line when it comes to LIV Golf. But he understands that this war of words that they have found themselves isn't doing anyone any good. So it seems to me he tried to de-escalate that today.
And Rex, speaking of Rory, he told The Guardian that he felt betrayed by some of his former Ryder Cup teammates like Lee Westwood, Ian Poulter, and Sergio Garcia. What was their reaction to that today?
Ian Poulter was asked specifically about this, and he immediately pushed back on just the idea of betrayal. And he pointed out correctly that all of the European players who have maintained their membership on the DP World Tour can continue to compete, can continue to try to rack up world ranking points, can continue to try to earn Ryder Cup points to qualify for the next year's team. Ian said that's what he hopes to do, and that he has always been on the side of he wants to be passionate. He wants to be a part of that team. Now, that being said, he also understands that there is a disconnect between the players who have joined LIV Golf, and there is not a welcoming vibe for them back on the Ryder Cup and the DP World Tour. And he also pointed out that there is a hearing in February in the UK that will decide if they're able to do both. And there is a sense of confidence right now among those players that they will be able to do both, to play LIV Tour and the DP World Tour and possibly earn a spot on that Ryder Cup. So for a player like Ian Poulter, he was a bit surprised.